Well, welcome everybody. Good morning. 11 o'clock on the East Coast, 8 o'clock on the West. And thank you for joining us for our first episode of 2020. That's an ongoing series of our 20 for 2020 webinars, educational webinars for both people interested in emergency reporting and customers alike. We did 4 at the end of 2019, and now we're jumping into 2020. Today's topic is going to be on ISO success. So we're going to give a quick introduction. We'll give a run through of our objective. I'll give you, those of you that are new to emergency reporting, I'm going to give you a little background about who we are, a little overview of our system features, and then we'll jump into today's topic, which is all about ISO success and improving your ISO score. First, a little bit about me. I'm a retired Battalion Chief and paramedic out of Southern Arizona. I currently reside in Tucson, Arizona. Spent 22 years in the fire service. Joined emergency reporting in 2011 as a regional trainer. Went on to do Department of Defense and international training, and was promoted to Business Development Analyst back in July of 2018. I still do quite a bit of professional services for our customers and a lot of strategic account management as well. It's been quite an adventure. 2019 was a very busy travel year for me, and it's going to start picking up again tomorrow as we head out for our business development and sales team meeting out in Florida. So getting ready to go from sort of cool weather here in Tucson to really warm weather in Florida, so I'm okay with that. So here's our objective today, and we like to keep it straightforward and simple, although ISO is anything but simple, but I will show you ways in our system that should make your life easier. And so today we're going to determine how can I better document my department's performance so that my ISO PPC score will improve. And so we're going to hit a lot of those elements today as we go through our time together. And be sure to ask questions in the GoToMeeting control panel. Be sure to ask questions. I will answer them as best as I can, either during the session or at the end of the session. But I always like to make sure all questions are addressed before we wrap up today. A little bit about emergency reporting, especially for those of you that are considering joining us. So we have well over 480,000 personnel within our system, 165,000 unique users. We're over 6,800 now departments worldwide. And we develop our software based on the agile software development process. Basically, we're doing releases every 2 weeks in a nutshell. Now we're doing hot fixes in between that and such, but essentially software is never finished. It's ongoing iterations. And because we are software as a service, which means we are web-based, there is no software to install on your local machines. You are always using the latest version. And we're making changes, like I said, constantly, and those changes are typically rolled out every 2 weeks, again, unless there's an urgent need to fix a bug or there's a major issue with the system, which is very rare. So we have what's called the 3 nines in our business, the 99.9% uptime and reliability. We actually exceed that, but what it means, if you wanted to break it down into something meaningful, what does that mean, 99.9%? 525,600 minutes in a year. Our max downtime is 526.2 minutes. That's the 3 nines. We're up more than that, but I don't believe we're quite to the 4 nines. But you can see out of that many minutes in a year, we're down very little. Our support is 100% US based. We have priority 1 issues that are monitored 24/7, and our typical hours of business for support is 0630 to 1730 Pacific time. We support agency compliance with many NFPA standards. These are just 3 of the highlights there: 1300, 1500, 1710, 1720. We're also adhere very closely to NFPA 950 and 951 that govern data management and data in the fire service in general. We also have enterprise contracts with both the United States Marine Corps and the United States Army. In other words, we serve the entire United States Marine Corps and United States Army fire and emergency services. And our 4 pillars are on the right there. So we help you with overall compliance to these standards, help you manage your operations. we build relationships. And so that, I think, is for me the key, is that there's all sorts of products out there to help you manage your data, but it's about the relationship that you have with the company, the support, the relationship you have with support, your sales rep, and the rest of us in the company. So we try to very much make this human interaction throughout, because data may drive the fire service, but really humans are in the driver's seat. And then of course, data is what this is all about, being able to manage it and store all of it and make sense of it all. So that's just a quick overview about who we are. Our system features include 16 modules. We have very many partner interfaces through our API, so scheduling program, en route mode software, prevention programs, all through our API. We also have a very robust CAD interface. In fact, I can't think of a CAD vendor that we don't interface with. Over 600 plus system reports, and then a comprehensive analytics tools for 1710, 1720, and NFPA 1500, and then rolling out this year, which you will see here in the next few weeks and months, is our business intelligence tool that'll help you take more control of your data and mine it the way that you need to mine it. So we're very excited about that coming up. So a special thanks for this presentation goes out to my friend David Richardson. He's an administration major out at the Midwest City Fire Department in Oklahoma. He's helped me a lot understand the ISO process since he was a rep for 7 years, and his department has received and maintained the ISO Class 1 3 times thus far under his leadership. And so he's been instrumental in helping, and a lot of what you're going to see here is the work of what he's done using emergency reporting to be successful with ISO, and then his willingness to share that with our team here at Emergency Reporting. So got to send out a thanks to David. All right, so before we proceed, these are the ISO classes, but I've got a couple questions for you that I want to start off with that will engage you a little bit and then help me learn a little bit about who you are. So first question coming up on the poll, you'll see this on your screen. And so if you're multitasking, take a look up at your screen, and I'm looking to see what type of agency do you work for? Are you career, volunteer, combo, federal, or Department of Defense? All right, almost everybody's voted, right on. Okay, couple more seconds. 3, 2, 1, last chance. Everybody's voted. I think we got one more person. All right, closing the poll. And we've got a good almost even representation today. So mostly combo today. Okay, I think that might have been the first time we've had more combo than anybody else. Some volunteer and career, so thank you very much for that. All right, I got 2 more questions. Next one, what is your current ISO score? So is it a 1 or 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, 9 or 10, or I'm not sure, or it's not applicable because you're international or your Department of Defense? All right, cool, almost done. 3, 2, 1, closing the poll. Okay. Check this out. All right, so we've got about 20% of you are 1 and 2. Congratulations, fantastic. 48%, about half at 3 to 5. Some at a 6 to 8. Nobody's at a 9 or 10. And then we've got some that are either not sure or because of your jurisdiction being international or Department of Defense, it's not applicable. Cool. All right. Last one, everybody, but thank you for participating. And then just so we kind of get a feel who's on with us today, are you currently an ER customer, or are you looking for a new RMS and you're interested in us? All right, last chance, closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. So 15, yep, this is about typical. Maybe a little bit more today that are interested in ER, and then usually it's our existing customers that are on board. So, hey, thanks for doing that. Really appreciate you helping us collect some of that information. It helps us as far as what we're going to do in the future with these webinars and understanding those that are participating. So thank you very much. All right, so back to the presentation, and then we'll get into the system as well. So here's the breakdown of ISO, and you're all familiar with it. You could have a split class also, combination of truck and water, or truck only for certain areas based on your water supply. And all classes apply to those areas within 5 miles of a fire station and 1,000 feet of a hydrant, unless mobile water is being used. Here's an interesting stat. Now, granted, this is a couple years old, but it probably is fairly close still. This is from Fire Rescue One online, the magazine, and then of course their online portal. And it breaks down how the classes break out in the United States. And so it's very close, if not spot on, to our little sample survey today. You've got a small amount of 305s, very much a bell curve here, and then you've got a little spike there with the class 9s. So you can see you're in, those of you that's responded, you're in good company regardless of what class you're in, and you're probably working, of course, towards improving it, and that's what we're here to help you with today. All right, so here's how that breakdown works. So for the ISO PPC score, 10% is your communications, 50% is your fire department, which is what we're going to focus on today, 40% is your water department, and then again, the other one we're going to focus on is your community risk reduction, which is 5.5% bonus points. You can see you got 100% just with the blue, red, and orange. But then you get a little bump here. So in case you're lacking in any of these other three, the community risk reduction helps offset any kind of lacking in the other three categories, which is kind of nice. All right, so take a look at this slide real quick. This is part of the fire department scoring and some of the things we're going to go over today. So as you can see here, the column 1 is the percentage of the score as it applies to the PPC. Second column, the title or the topic. The third column is the section within the PPC. And then the next two columns are the ER system report and title of system report that you can generate as long as you're putting good data in that will help answer the questions and the needs when an ISO auditor comes to town. So the other thing I want to point attention to is in your GoToMeeting control panel, there is a handout section. There are 2 handouts I provided you. One is the 20 for 20, this presentation in a PDF format, so you can reference it later. And then the other one is our white paper that kind of summarizes it and can help you make a compelling case. Those of you that are interested in coming to emergency reporting can help make a compelling case as to why ER is a good choice, especially if you wish to improve your PPC score for ISO. So feel free to download those. They're sort of large files, but they should download just fine. They're both high quality PDFs that are suitable for printing if you need to. Okay, so hose carried. All right, here's the formula in 512.b for hose carried. Let's calculate the credit for hose carried as follows. So length of supply line, okay, plus the length of the attack hose divided by 1200. And that gives you a credit score for that. So the question is, well, how do I find out how do I do this without having to go to all the trucks and measure everything or just manually add it all up? Well, and I'm going to do a lot of this in our system to show you this, but in the maintenance module of our system, you have the ability to create categories and subcategories. And in this case, we're going to talk about fire hose. So we've got a category, hose, and then you can see right here are subcategories of hose. And so this allows you to track essentially every piece of hose in your organization, track its maintenance, track its testing, and above all, be able to run a report to determine how much of it that you actually have. And so here's an example. This is the report 963. And so this is my buddy from Darren Keith out at Rock Island Arsenal, one of our DoD customers. He's given me permission to share this. And so this particular report, you can see that we've got, and you can run this report for certain subcategories. So I ran it for 1 3/4 inch. And because of the data they put into the system, you can see that he's able to get good data out. Now, here's one thing I want to mention to those of you configuring your accounts. In the subcategory, you've got the diameter. There's no need to put the diameter in the size field. You're going to want to put the length there, because by putting the length allows you to get the grand total of how much hose you actually have. And so that is a kind of a best practice recommendation. You can see they did some with the diameter, and then they moved on to doing the length, which is preferable because you already know what the diameter is here by identifying it within the subcategory itself. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, next up, 512.c, equipment on existing engine companies. Okay, and so the pumper service test program, average interval between 3 most recent tests, and this shows you your credit. So how do I track that in emergency reporting? Just like this. You can run report number 1699, apparatus maintenance history, for apparatus, for maintenance type. And so you can see I selected here NFPA annual test, whoops, NFPA annual test. And then you can see when that was done and any maintenance notes about it. And of course, you can attach that to the maintenance item as well. So what I want to show you is the good stuff that you put in is going to give you good stuff out when ISO comes to town. It will make your life a lot less painful and will frankly impress them with your organization and quality of data that you have in the system. But it all starts with what gets put in. Okay, next one, it continues the equipment on existing engine companies. Oops, did I get that? Oops, that's 512B. The title of that one is wrong. I apologize for that slide. That's for the pump test. This one is for the annual testing on equipment. So what the last one was pump test, I apologize. This one is the equipment. And so again, when you run report number 1515, and I selected hose and just the maintenance type NFPA annual test, you can see that all of the times that you did an annual hose test for the time range selected, and in this case it was 2019, it will show up here for each section. So remember back here, average interval between the 3 most recent tests, okay? So if that average interval, if you're testing your hose once a year, you're gonna get the maximum points, and you can prove it with this report per hose section. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first one was pump testing of apparatus. The next one was annual testing of hose. All right, so safety analytics also will help you here. Now, those of you that are current customers of emergency reporting, you all definitely and the wellness behavior gauge that comes with for all customers. Going with apparatus or equipment requires an upgrade, but what this lets you see at a glance, and I'll show this to you in the system, is that you have the ability to see the black bar means I have a truck that is out of service. 6 means the red, where it says number 6, tells me that there are 6 apparatus that are either non-compliant, they have not had their annual pump test, or they have not had their daily check, and then 2 apparatus are fully compliant. Pump test is good, and they've had their daily check. So even at a glance, without running a report, you can see the status of your apparatus. Likewise for equipment, this is exclusively driven by the annual tests for like ladders, hose, and such. And so anything that requires an annual test, you can monitor here. So this snapshot shows me that I have 152 pieces of equipment that are past due or have not had its annual NFPA test, and 599 that have had it. So this supplements those reports by giving you an at-a-glance look, and then once we get into the system, I'll show you how this functions, where you can have quick links to those pieces of equipment and or apparatus. All right, deployment analysis, okay? And so in the deployment analysis, an alternative to determine the number of needed engine and ladder service companies through the road mile analysis, it may use results of a systematic performance evaluation. It analyzes computer-aided dispatch history that, with its current deployment of companies, the fire department meets the time constraints for initial arriving engine and initial full alarm assignment in accordance with the general criteria of NFPA 1710. That's a mouthful, so just download that PDF and you can review it there as well. But essentially what I want to show you is a report like 1641. It's a compliance report. It's your aggregate compliance time by incident type for response mode, because we just really care about code 3 calls, and the date range. So you get to filter all of this and be able to determine how well your department has been in compliance with your standards to cover and or your 1710 adherence. And so this is a particularly strong one of my favorite reports because I'm visual. I like to see the red light, green light, so I can see at a glance what's compliant and what's not. And looking at this report, you've got the ability to see the incident itself, the first 4 arriving units, their times, and then based on what is entered in the parameters for this report, whether they were compliant or not for the first arriving and subsequent arriving units. It shows you their compliance, if the first unit was compliant, second, third, and fourth, and then it shows you the compliance for the whole incident, and then on a per apparatus basis. So when we get down to the end, all right, this shows me, and then there's a lot more here. You can see the little squiggle there. There's a lot more to this report than just a snapshot, but it shows me that the overall compliance was 4 out of 17 incidents. And then 24% of the time, my first due unit arrived. 19% of the time, my second due unit arrived within standards of cover time, and then my third and fourth units got there 100% of the time. But looking at all the incident in total, again, it has to be 100% across the board per incident. So this incident would count as one of those 4, as would this one. So pretty powerful report and tells a great story. That's 1641. Okay, here's another one. So this is something I learned from David. So 570.A or 570A, excuse me, on duty firefighters at fire stations. This is report number 1193. And this is their daily roster, okay? And you can add up all the hours and divide it by 8760 to give you your total for on-duty firefighters. But one of the things that we want to mention, is that you can't count the partial time that people are at the station, those of you that are volunteer departments, okay? And so when they're there for part of the time, not necessarily a full 24 hours, but you can document that, and that will count towards the time of on-duty firefighters at the station. So they come and spend time cleaning the station for a few hours. That kind of counts. And if you're documenting that, divide it by that 8760 and be able to get a good number for ISO on the 570A section of the PPC. That's report 1193. Okay, training. All right, so training, looking at the standards. These are the ISO standards for capturing training information. This report, 1681, allows you to capture the total number of hours for standard. Now, there are a couple ways to do this in the system. My preference is to use the standard. Here's why. And again, when we get into the system, we'll be able to show you that a little bit more. And so what this means is you've got standards assigned to a class. Now, you could assign more than one ISO or NFPA standard to a class if you're trying to make sure that single class can give you credit for more than a single standard. It's more difficult to do that using training codes in the system. And so what this report did was I ran it for 2019, all personnel, and I wanted to run it for company training. Okay, now I would probably break this down and make a group. Instead of all personnel, I would make a group called firefighters, for example. Okay, I would make that group, run it, and then it would show me per person the training code category, the training code, the date it was completed, and the code hours. But it's only those classes that had ISO 580.B assigned to it, and I'll show you where to do that in the system. Okay, so that is one way to do it. Now, one caveat I want to mention, and I'm learning more from an ISO rep that I'm working with right now. They're getting to be a little more sticklers on proving training records. They're going to want more of a description, and so we're going to be working in-house to perhaps make the objective a mandatory field. This is just some things we are considering. Nothing's in play yet, but to make the objective a required field, and then have a report that will also summarize what was done in the class. So perhaps underneath here would be that the objective, because he's stating, this representative that works for ISO, that just having this is not enough. They want more of a description of what was trained on. So that's something new, probably both for you and for us, where they're going to want more detail. And so we'll do our best to stay on top of those expectations. And I expect a modified report sometime this year to help with that reporting process for the training hours. Okay, community risk. This is 5.5% and it's a bonus. All right, so notice here, we've got, again, and this is in your handouts, but the one for public education programs, this is section 1032 alpha through delta, and report number 1108, and then I'm going to show you another report that's going to be very helpful to you as well, as far as being able to talk about your community risk reduction program. All right, so fire safety education in schools, the conduction of fire drills. We have a way to report this that will make your life so much easier. Here's what it looks like, and this is in the events module. And again, I'm going to go through this in the system so you can see how it's all set up. Okay, this particular report, 1774, when we're talking about fire safeties in schools, okay, again, counting a little towards that 5.5% bonus. In the events, we have a category called fire drills. I can also create event types, and I'll show you how I did that in my account. And so I can run this report to show you when we did fire drills, and again, go back to the slide, one fire drill, according to each school must conduct one fire drill exit in accordance to the criteria of NFPA 101, okay, each month. So if I have, for an elementary school, and I have 12 fire drills listed here for Henry Elementary, now I have 100% towards that score for that school, and I can also document the number of civilians, non-fire department personnel that participated in this. And I know that has become a metric for community risk reduction programs, because it's very hard to measure the fires that don't never get started, because people were fire smart and did the right thing to prevent a fire from either starting or quickly putting it out. And so measuring that is very difficult. And one metric that is very good to measure is how many civilians, how many people did you connect with in your community? And this can be done through any event within our system. All right, so thank you for letting me go through that. I'm gonna go ahead and escape out of here, and we're gonna go into the system itself. So going back into the system itself to show you some of those areas that we talked about earlier. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so management of equipment. So very quickly here, in your maintenance module, as you create your categories and subcategories. Now, those of you that see this little red shield here, that means it's safety analytics, the full version of safety analytics. If you're using it down here, you can create categories and subcategories outside of that. This just feeds that gauge I was showing you earlier for safety analytics. And so again, you can put in here your sections, each individual piece of hose. You can schedule annual tests, and of course you have your historical history, your historical maintenance list here of what was done with that hose. All right, and then so the key is being able to make sure that that gets entered. Now, if you're testing hose in a batch, you can also check multiple sections and add a maintenance record for, say you did all of the 1 3/4, or in this case 2.5 inch hose on a single apparatus. You can filter by that apparatus here under ownership, check those boxes, add a maintenance record, select NFPA annual test, We completed it today. Tim completed it. It passed. Now, if there were any costs or labor hours that you wish to track, you can. Any documentation, images, whatnot, any file that you'd like to upload can be done here as well. Then we'll complete. And now if I look in its history, it's here, okay? And so that will give me report number 1699 when ISO comes to town. So for example, if I run, whoops, that's for apparatus, standby, we'll get the right one, 1515 is the one I really wanted. And so if I ran it for 2020, and I'm looking at just my, and I'll just actually run it for everything so it'll show up, since we haven't done a lot here. And so you can see that I've got the 2020 annual hose test on those two sections of hose. And then of course, the overall equipment list, that is report number 963. And then there's my length. So you can see back in the day, this was entered as 2.5 inch, not good. 100-foot section, that's good. Now, one thing I want to mention to you, this particular report does not add it up, okay? So ISO is looking for that total number. So those of you that have used the system know that you can do an Excel or a text download. So if I did a text download, it's very easy to simply run a sum against that column to get the grand total, and that helps you with that calculation for 512.B hose carried. And so you can see, there's that report. There's my column. And then I would do a sum, and that would give me the total amount of hose for that subcategory. So you've got, remember, they want supply and attack hose. So it's very easy, very, very easy to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do because of time, I'm going to jump into report number 1641. And with this, I'm going to actually go into a live account because it's going to be far more interesting, and this department has given me permission to do so. So I want to show you what this report looks like and then explain to you from a compliance perspective how it's going to function. This is Orange County, Florida. They're running 10,000 calls plus a month. And so they have a lot of data to go through. All right, so we're just going to take yesterday and today, and let's say they have a first arriving compliance time of 8 minutes. We just worry about lights and sirens, all zones. Second unit needs to be there within 12, and then we're going to pick just fires, 100 series calls. And if you don't know how to do it, I'm going to show you real quick. You can pick multiple, and so let's say I wanted to just grab 300 series. I would select that filter or pick them one at a time, add all. Remember this as 300 series, okay. And then now I have the ability, instead of having to go pick them every time, it will auto select just the 100 series calls, all stations, and then I'll go ahead and create this report. And then you can see the data being produced here. Okay, so they had a building fire in Weetamoo Circle. All right, 100% compliance. Then they had a brush fire. They missed it just by 53 seconds. And again, this could be due to distance, right? They're on state roads. And so this tells a really great story. Any questions so far? Okay, so far so good. All right, so report 1193, this report for ISO talks about staffing. So on-duty firefighters at stations. Okay, this is pulling from the daily roster. We'll see if we get lucky here and we see what kind of data that we get in a demo account. Okay, so this is breaking it down per person. And so then you were going to add up all of these hours and divide it by 8760. And that will give you the credit towards 570A for on-duty firefighters at stations. The reason you're using the daily roster is you're able to capture the different activity codes that apply to being at the station. That's the key. This is especially critical for volunteer departments. And again, you wouldn't add up, of course, anytime that they were sick, trading off, vacation, you would exclude those hours from the formula that you would use to add up those hours and to be able to produce a number for ISO. Okay, next is our training. So let me show you a little bit in the training module a way to manage your training records. Okay, so in the settings, you've got your class categories. Those are the biggest branches of the tree, of which there are relatively few. Then you have your training code categories, which I've seen departments have those be the same, which is perfectly fine, class categories and training code categories. Generally, this gets slightly more detailed, and they're the folders that all of the training codes go into. The training codes are intended to be a description of what you're training on. So not quite the class title, but descriptive enough that it covers what you're going to be doing in a particular class. And you can see some of the titles here as an example. Okay. Then this last tab over here on the right is for standards. This is where I like to put my ISO standards. And you can put NFPA standards, you can put state required standards, you can put local jurisdiction standards, anything that you want, because what this allows you to do by building this here is on any given class. So let's say we'll go to in this extrication class. Here under training codes, you put in what you trained on, but then here you add the standards. So for example, I'm going to apply both company training and officer training, 580B and 580.C. So what this means is I'm applying that standard, those two standards to this class, and each standard will give me 8 hours per standard. But when I run the report, so let's go ahead and complete this. So when I complete this class and then run that report, 1681, we'll just run it for the whole year last year. I'm going to pick just personnel, so I'm just going to pick company officers. So for example, I'm going to pick multiple. I'm going to select my officers, and again, I'm just going to randomly pick some people that hopefully I get them captured into the report. I'm going to call this 580.B company officers. Okay, so now I know I'm going to run that, and then I'm just going to run that standard. So it's only going to pull those people in this standard. So any class that those personnel attended that had this standard associated with it will give me this result. And so this can show ISO how many hours you have per person for that standard. And there it is. Does that, I hope that makes sense to everybody. Now that extrication class didn't pop up here because the people in the class weren't part of this group. Trey is, as a company officer, so he appears here. Obviously, this is a single class reporting, but think of an entire year's worth of training for your organization and you'd have a very nice summarized report here. Perfect. Okay. Any questions? Okay, let's jump into the events module for community risk reduction, and then we'll open it up for questions as we wrap it up for today. Okay, so I'm gonna look at our new events module. Looks different, but functions even better than before. And you can see the fire drills that we've done here. So when I go ahead, I'm gonna go ahead and unlock this class. I'm gonna go in and edit it. So as we go through, you're gonna have the attending personnel, the firefighters that participated in that event, documenting the attending non-personnel or non-agency personnel, civilians, okay? And then you'll go ahead and lock this event. All right, but remember here in settings is where the key takes place. So that's what the class will look like, or the event will look like when you build it. But in settings, it's important that you create your categories to reflect what you want to capture for community risk reduction. So you can see here, I've got fire drills. Those are my big folders. My subfolders are types. So what I did for fire drills, since I know that this is part of the community risk reduction PPC 1032 Bravo 1, fire safety in schools, in order to better organize it, I did it this way, fire drill, and then instead of having to worry about it being alphabetical, I wanted it to be in order by grade, so I just put a number in front of it. 1 dot pre-K school, 2 dot emergency elementary school, 3 dot middle, 4 dot high, and then 5 college or adult learning facility. And so when I go build a class, and I say class, I should say event. Okay, so we're gonna call this 2020-01 for January, fire drill. Now, you might be thinking, well, I'm gonna put that in the location also. I also like to put it in the title. Category, fire drills, subcategory, middle school, start date, we'll do today, time, 10 o'clock, end, same day, and we'll figure we'll be there about an hour and 15 minutes. Location, narrative, any description that you want. Attending personnel, so we want to add some personnel to it. And today was just from C shift. Okay, so we've got these 4, add them. If I check this box, which I didn't earlier, it will automatically fill this when I add personnel. But in this case, I'm gonna have to manually do it. Civilian entries. And we got some senior volunteers. Okay, no batteries were installed, no tours, any of that. Go ahead and lock the event, create it. And so now, if I go and run report number 1774, and again, we'll just do it for 2020. I want to see all my fire drills. Again, we're talking ISO here. Okay, now I'm going to pick multiple. So this is great. I'm going to go and I can remember this selection as ISO 1032.B.1 fire drills. So I know each time I can just run that, and I probably just will have that one because the event has to be locked for it to be documented. And so you're right there, that 5.5%, you're already having a good chunk of that data being able to be delivered and run and explained to ISO when they come to town. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I know that's a lot to cover. We did go through multiple modules and multiple reports as it pertains to ISO. And so what I want to do next is just see if we've got any questions and address those questions before we close out for the day. Anyone have any questions, any concerns, anything that you'd like to share on how you've used emergency reporting to improve your ISO score? I know we have a couple great case studies on our website that talk about departments that have been very successful in using emergency reporting to improve their ISO score. All right, if there are no questions, I want to thank you all for joining today. I'll give you back in about 15 minutes of your day here, so you can get back to work and do all the things that fill up your day. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in future 20 for 20 webinars. And yes, Robert, this view will be available for viewing. We will have it up on our YouTube channel and within our knowledge base later on today, or worst case, it'll be sometime tomorrow. So you bet, yep, it'll be available for viewing. The recording of this webinar will be available for viewing later on. In fact, I will give you guys the link right now. So here's our channel. And here it is in the chat for you. And you can just have that link. Yes, Brett, great question. I know you had to, and that's fully expected. You had to take a call. So you had to run on a call. So is there a report that isolates training by specific standard? Yes, that was the one I had just gone over prior to the event. That is going to be report number 1681 is a very good report. So let me show you for 1681. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it for all classes, all standards. And so as long as you have configured your standards tab and settings to reflect your ISO and NFP and other standards that you may be trying to follow, this allows you to apply multiple standards to a single class. So you can see here, I ran this for all standards. Now, I do not run this report for all standards at once. I just wanted to show you the output. You will want to run this report for a single standard at a time for the best results, because this report doesn't break it down. When you do it for multiple standards, it doesn't break it down per standard. So I just run it for a single standard. So let's pretend this was just ran for company training. I can see that Dave Adams took these two classes based on code and code category on these dates and earned those hours for that particular standard. So I'm glad you asked that question, because the way this report is designed, it functions most ideally when you run it for a single standard at a time. Don't do it like I just did. Again, I just did it to show you the output of what the report would look like, but run it for a single standard, because ISO will be happy to see, oh, these are how many hours you have per person for company training. Or in this case, you only run your existing driver operators. You'll group those personnel, and you'll group them as existing DOs. So only that standard applies to that person for those classes. Make sense? So when you say multi-agency training, are you trying to document personnel from other agencies, Devin, or just the fact that your guys went to a multi-agency training event? Kind of elaborate a little bit more for me on that. Both, okay. So there's no problem in documenting. Now for ISO, it's just going to capture your personnel, all right, for ISO. However, in the training class itself, if you have multiple people coming to multiple agencies coming to your department to take a class, when you go to the roster, do one that's unlocked. You can add non-agency personnel here. Okay, that's when people come to your organization, you're leading the training and you want to add them to the class roster. Now this won't be applicable for ISO. And then say you go, your department goes to a multi-agency event. You just simply create that class in your ER account and enter it as such, putting in all of the relevant information. And in that case, you typically would not probably need to document non-agency personnel, though you could. The intent is just to say, okay, this was held at another location, and you can document that location here, but it's just that essentially the same as putting in any training class that would be a local training class or an on-site training class for your department. Does that help? Cool. All right, you're very welcome. Okay, so Mary Lisa, so if standards were never set up, what is the easiest way to put them in going back 5 years? I will have to tell you that there is no easy way to do it. Reach out to me via email, Tom, T-O-M, @emergencyreporting.com, and put in all your contact information, and I will give you a call. I may not be able to give you a call today. My day's pretty packed. I just put my email in the chat, and I can give you some ideas. So how many classes do you have in there ultimately, Mary Lisa? If you were to look at your table of classes, how many classes are we talking about? Because that will help kind of determine what we want to do here. Is it hundreds, thousands? Because what you may want to do is just start from thousands. Yeah, okay, then we don't want to. I would say you will just want to run some different reports in the training module to show the hours of training, and then do your best to isolate them per ISO standard. It would be way too much work to try and add standards to the classes, historical classes. But what you can do, what I would strongly recommend doing, is start this year, so January 1, 2020, and start applying standards to classes. And at least starting this year, you'll be able to run the reports that pertain to standards in the system. But I can help you at least make sense of the data that you currently have and maybe make it easier for your ISO audit coming up this fall, like you said. So reach out to me via email, and I will be happy to help you. And so the chart, so I will send you to a chart that will show you the setting up of those standards. All right, any other questions? All right, everybody. Well, I sure hope this was helpful to you. Like I said, I know it's a lot to go over in a relatively short amount of time. Make sure you downloaded those handouts. And if you run into any other questions, just email me. And we'll look forward to seeing you on our next 20 for 2020 webinar. All right, take care, everybody.